All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Today's daf is Kuf Nun Daled 154, and we are picking up Emirat Hashem on Kuf Nun Gimel Amud Beis 153b. We have a lot to do today. We are picking up Emirat Hashem on the first wide line on 153b, Amr of Ada Bar Ava. So a lot to do. We want to thank our sponsors for this morning's shir, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Av, Avram and Shane D. Kelman, with the hope and tefillah that the month of Av will become a Yom Tov filled with joy in the eternal Beis HaMikdash. We thank our Week of Learning sponsors, the Ringo, Ram, and Fine families, for dedicating the Shiurim and Drushas this week in the Zechus of Arafur Shalima for Rachel Batya Bas Leah Fine. We thank our Day of Learning sponsors, Alan and Sherry Steinmetz, in honor of the 95th birthday of Adam Steinmetz's grandfather, Mr. Anatoly Tenenbaum, wishing him good health and many opportunities to celebrate Simchas. What an incredible milestone. Ad Mea Ve'esim Shalom Tobos. Beautiful. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Natan and Leah Berry, in memory of Leah's father, Eliezer Avram Tzvi ben Psach Yaleib, Zichron Livracha, and Richard and Sharon Buck, in honor of the bar mitzvah of their son, Avi Noam. We thank all of our sponsors, all of the neshamas shav and aliyah, all of those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael, and all of those celebrating simchas, be it 95th birthdays or bar mitzvahs. Should Emirat Hashem continue to celebrate simchas ad mea ve'esim shanim tovos. And I will say with that, let us begin. A lot to do today. So Amar of Adabar Ava. So Adabar Ava said as follows: Haisa chavilasa munachas lo al kasefo, ratz tachta ad shemagil beis. Supposed to remember again, we ended off yesterday with this interesting discussion about what happens in the event that halacha l'maisa, you are stuck with your wallet. Shabbos is about to start. So again, Chazal operating with the principle that a person is not just going to put down their wallet in the street and walk away. So what is the best way forward? So we've seen a progression. If possible, if you're traveling with a non-Jew, give it to the non-Jew. Don't have a non-Jew, if you're traveling with a donkey, go ahead and give it to the donkey. We then saw Chazal's, super secret eitzah that they did not want to really share or disseminate, which is, you could carry your wallet, but just move at increments of less than Dalet Amos. Less than Dalet Amos. So we'll actually see that. I'm going to hopefully have time to do that today to show you that inside the super secret eitzah is not so super secret anymore, now that it has been codified in Shulchan Aruch. So again, it's really, we'll see that halacha l'mais in just a bit. So the Gemara says as follows: if a person was carrying a bundle on their back, so we'll say, so the scene over here is, it's Erev Shabbos, it's getting close to Shabbos, I'm carrying a bundle on my back, and I have no place to put it down. So what can you do? So we'll say what you do is pretty much start running before Shabbos starts, and don't stop until you get home. Right? So we'll say, so what's the pshat there? Because remember again, in order to violate hotzah, you need an akira and a hanacha. Right? A lifting up of the item from its place of rest and a putting it back down to rest. So essentially, if you go ahead and you keep running, you go ahead and you start running, you do that akira before Shabbos, and the hanacha doesn't begin or doesn't occur until after you get home, then halacha l'maisa you haven't really violated anything for Shabbos. So the Gemara says, daf karatz, but you have to run. Aval kali lo, but ultimately you can't. I will say now, the truth is, according to this logic, you don't have to run. You could just walk, right? Walking is the same thing. You just can't stop. So why did Chazal say you have to run? The Gemara says, my time. No. We're concerned that if you walk, see, also when a person's walking, so just even not subconsciously, even without thinking about it, you just stop. Well, if you stop, that's when you're in trouble. If you run, that's enough of a reminder for you that you can't stop, and therefore run all the way home. The Gemara says, sof, kimat lebeisei efshar de lo kai porta, the kama ayel merishus rabim merishus hayachid. But also, here's the problem. That works fine when you're running through the Rishus Harabim. But at some point in time, you're going to have to get to your house. And I both say the assumption is you have to pause for a moment before, unless you yell ahead, open the door, right? And you're just going to dart right in. Bipashtos, there's some slowing down, there's some pause before you enter into your house. In which case, again, when you stop, you're going to be transporting an item from Rishus Harabim into Rishus Hayachid, to which the Gemara says, Kizdezar kila achar yad. You're right. So instead what you do is, as you're getting close to your house, you don't really slow down, but you throw the bundle into your home with a shinui. So again, remember, we're talking about the Rabbanans here, but as you've already seen, that the Rabbanan relaxed certain halachas when it comes ultimately, again, to money. Out of a concern about saying, again, just understand the calculation here. It's not that money is the most important thing in the world, so Chazal relaxed their restrictions with money. But Chazal understood human nature. And human nature is that if you make me choose between a significant loss and a biblical prohibition, the truth is I'm going to choose the violation of the biblical prohibition to stave off the dramatic loss. So therefore, in order to avoid that, Chazal said we'd rather have you deal with rabbinic issues and thereby again save your money, than run into the risk ultimately again of violating biblical prohibitions. Amar Rami Bar Chama. Shabbos says, so now we're taking a step back for just a moment. Rami Bar Chama says as follows. So we'll say, see, here's what's interesting. The second eitzah that was given is, if you can't find a place to put down your wallet on Erev Shabbos, put it on your donkey. So remember again, we'll say the issue that we got into is, but one second, aren't you leading a laden animal, right? And leading a laden animal is a biblical prohibition as well. Do you remember the Gemara gave an eitzah? The Gemara said, no, put it on the animal while the animal is moving, and what? Take it off right before the animal stops. That way there's no akira and hanacha with the animal. So now the Gemara is going to launch into a little bit of a discussion about the malacha of mechamer. So mechamer means leading a laden animal. So it says the Gemara, if a person leads a laden animal on Shabbos, b'shogeg chayiv chatos, we'll say if you do so unintentionally, you're chayiv chatos, b'mezid chayiv skila. If you did it b'mez, so meaning, which is another way of saying that mechamer is just a regular malacha. So in general, if you violate one of the lamates malachas, if you do so unintentionally, it's a chatos. You do so intentionally, chas v'shalom, it's skila. My time. So we'll say, but one second, this is not a malacha I'm doing myself. My animal's doing the malacha. Amarava, damakra, lo sasa kamalacha ato ubehemtecha. Behemto dum yodide. You see, the Torah equates my animal with me. Mahu b'shogig chayiv chatos b'mezid chayiv skila. Af behemto nam b'shogig chayiv chatos b'mezid chayiv skila. So the Torah equates my behema with me, just like I am chayiv b'chatas b'shogeg mezid skila b'mezid. So too again for my animal. If I do malacha with my animal, I'm chayiv the same things. Amar Rava says shtei tshuvas b'davar. There's two problems with that statement. Chadu dichsiv Torah achas yelachem la'osa b'shkaga v'hanefesh asher ta'aseh biyad rama. So we'll say, so problem number one is, this is the pasuk, by the way, by Avodah Zarah. Huksha kol Torah kula la'avodah zarah. We'll say in general, we look at avodah zarah as the paradigmatic example of punishment. So the Torah, because remember again, when it comes to avodah zarah, Torah says, Torah achas, there will be one rule, lachem for you, la'oseh b'shkaga, v'nefesh asher ta'aseh b'yad rama. So we'll say, so the phraseology by avodah zarah is, there's one rule for whoever violates the halacha intentionally and unintentionally, which Chazal understand to mean that the halachas by avodah zarah for intentional and unintentional transgression become essentially the paradigm for the way intentional and unintentional prohibitions work. So the Gemara says, Huksha kol Torah kula la'avodah zarah, so all prohibitions are compared to avodah zarah. Ma avodah zarah da'avid ma'aseh begufei. Hachanami da'avid ma'aseh begufei. So we'll say, what does avodah zarah teach you? When are you chayiv a chatos for unintentional violation and skila for intentional violation? When you do an act yourself. Right? Yeah, it's just, but again, what's mechamer? Mechamer is leading a laden animal. We'll say, how could I be chayiv, a chatos, and skila for something my animal does? Granted, I understand that maybe I'm not allowed to lead a laden animal, but that I should be chayiv skila because my animal carried a burden. The Gemara says that's not the way it works. That's number one. Number two, va'otinan hamachalas Shabbos Daf shechayv shegaso chatos va'azadono skila. Both listeners, we have another Mishnah. The Mishnah says if one violates Shabbos in a manner or in an area where you are chayiv a chatos for shogeg and skila for mezid, so I said that phraseology tells me that what michlal diika midi de'ein chayiv al shigaso chatos v'lo al zadono skila. So we'll say the way that sounds is that there is something for which I am not chayiv chatos for shogeg and mezid b'skila, umaynihu, and what is that? Lavda mechamer. Is that not rabosa mechamer? So we'll say, even though mechamer is a malacha, leading a laden animal is a malacha, but it's different than the other malachas, because the other malachas ultimately, again, are chayiv v'chatas for shogeg and skila for mezid, not mechamer. Tush Gemara says, no, that's not what it's referring to. Lo, tchumen v'alibud Rabbi Akiva. It could be referring to tchumen, because also Rabbi Akiva is of the position that halacha, said the halachos of tchum Shabbos boundaries are da'oraisa. But even Rabbi Akiva holds that it's da'oraisa, would agree that you are not chayiv v'chatas for shogeg violation or skila for a mezid violation, v'havara libud Rabbi Yossi, or kindling, because according to Rabbi Yossi, the reason why kindling, remember again, interestingly enough, the Torah discusses all malacha in a general sense, with one exception, havara. Torah says, "Lo saviru eish b'chomo shosech b'yom Shabbos." You can't kindle a fire. So there's a whole machlokes. We saw this before. Why is it that havara, that kindling, is singled out? So Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion that halacha l'maisa havara is singled out. Why? To teach you that it's only a lav. That whereas all the other malachas, if you violate them, b'shogeg it's a chatas, b'mezid it's a skila, havara is the exception. So we'll say top of kuf nun daled. So therefore, we'll say. So therefore, the Gemara seems to disprove. Rami Bar Chama's position. So Rami Bar Chama was of the position that mechamer is just like a regular malacha, and therefore, again, if you lead your laden animal on Shabbos b'shogeg, it's a chatos, b'mezid, it's a skila. Rava says there's two problems with this. Number one, it defies the paradigm of avodah zarah, which says that you're only chayiv chatas skila if you do something bigufcha, right, with your body. That's number one. And number two, we have a Mishnah that seems to indicate that halacha lemaisa, there is a malacha which is aser, which is daraisa, but does not have a chatas skila punishment associated with it. And Rava suggests that that is mechamer. So Rav Zvid Masniachi. So also Rav Zvid had a different interpretation or a different version. Top of Kuf Nun Daled Amud Aleph. Amarei Bar Chama hamechamer achar behemto b'Shabbos. If one goes in and leads his laden animal on Shabbos, b'shogeg eino chayiv chatos, b'mezid chayiv skila. So we'll say, listen to this version. So in the first version of Rami Bar Chama, Rami Bar Chama was treating mechamer just like a regular malacha. A regular malacha, which means, again, if you violate it b'shogeg, you're chayiv chatos. If you violate it b'mezid, you are chayiv skila. Comes along Rav Zvid, he says, no, that's not what Rav Chama said. Rav Chama said, in fact, if you do mechamer b'shogeg, you're pater, right? Enu chayiv chatos. I want to be clear, it doesn't mean that it's mutter, right? It just means that it's pater. However, b'mezid chayiv skila. Interestingly enough, but halacha l'maisa, if you do it intentionally, you will be chayiv skila. Okay, so the Gemara says, massive Rava. So just to understand the logic of that shita, so Bar Chama will say, if you do it b'shogeg, you're not chayiv b'chatos. Why not? Because it doesn't resemble avodah zarah. But if you do it b'mezid, you will be chayiv skila. Why? Because it will say, I do have a pasuk that says, lo sasek kamolacha ata ubehemtecha. So in this version, Bar Chama will say, right, so I'm pater on the shogeg because it doesn't resemble avodah zarah, but I will be chayiv skila for mezid, because Lamais I have a pasuk that says that it's aser. So Masiv Rava, so Rava raises a kasha, Hamechala les HaShabbos, b'davar shechayavin al shigaso chatas, chayavin al zidono skila. So I'll say, so listen to this. What about the following brisa? The brisa says that if one goes ahead and violates Shabbos in an area where you would be chayiv achatas for shogeg and chayiv skila for mezid. So we'll say, so now Rava understands over here that the brisa is creating a relationship. Ha'ein chayavin al shigagas achatos, ein chayavin al zidono skila. So Rava will say, the way one could read that brisa is that the brisa is creating a relationship. Which I will say is generally how we assume these halachas work, that there is a relationship between shogeg and mezid. When you have a chatos for shogeg, that's when you have skila for mezid. But in a situation where there is no chatos for shogeg, then what? Bepashtos, there is no skila for mezid. So therefore, Rava says, Rav Zavid, if you are correct in your analysis of Rami Bar Chama, and you want to suggest that halacha lamaisa, there is no chatos by shogeg mechamer, then there should be no skila for mezid as well. To which the Gemara says, no. Mi katani ha'in chayavin. Does the Mishnah say that? Right? Does the Raisa say? Does the Raisa say that if you're not chayiv achatos, you're not chayiv skila? That's not what it says. Chachi kamar davar shechayavin al shigagaso chatos chayavin al zedono skila. Yes, generally, for any malacha whose inadvertent transgression or violation, you would be chayiv achatos. For intentional transgression, you would be chayiv skila. However, the yesh davar shein chayavin al shigagaso chatos. V'chayavin al zedono skila. But I will say there is an exception to this rule. There is one thing which, again, for shogig you will not be chayiv achatos. Yet for mezid you will be chayiv skila. Umaynihu, and I will say, what is it? Right? What is the one malacha for which, again, for shogeg you are not chayiv achatos, yet by mezid you will be chayiv skila? So the Gemara says mechamer. Ultimately, again, that'll be the malacha of mechamer. So both say, so this is the shita of, again, it's a machlokes in what Rami Bar Chama said. So in first version of Rami Bar Chama, which was seemingly stated by Rami Bar Chama himself, mechamer is just a regular malacha. Therefore, again, b'shogeg chatos, b'meizid skila. Rav Zavid, no. A little bit of a different idea of Rami Bar Chama. He says, Rami Bar Chama really said that halacha l'maisa, b'shogeg nothing, b'shogeg pater aval aser, b'meizid chayiv skila. Okay, so now comes along, Gemara says, Rava, achua de Rav Mari bar Rochel. So Rava, who was the brother of Rav Mari bar Rochel. Va'amrila avuha de Rav Mari bar Rochel. Others say he was the father of Rav Mari bar Rochel. So we'll say, so just want to point something out over here. We've mentioned Rav Mari bar Rochel a number of times throughout Shas, because of course it's a very interesting name. Rav Mari, the son of Rochel, that's his mother obviously, was the Pshat. So we know this story. So Rachel was the daughter of Shmuel. She was taken captive. While in captivity, she became pregnant by one of her captors. That child was Rav Mari. Now there's an interesting twist to the story, which is her captor ultimately converts. His name was Isser. Interesting name, right? His name was Isser, as he's known throughout Shas as Isser Giura. Now, of course, understand, so why isn't Rav Mari known by his father's name? Because we know how this works. Because Lemaisa, since his father was not Jewish at the time that his mother became pregnant, so therefore, technically speaking, on a Judaic level, that's not his father. So therefore, Allah Lemaisa, he's always known as Rav Mari bar Rochel. We'll say it's really always something amazing that it's one of these nuanced stories that Chazal don't say explicitly, but that teaches you. No matter what your family circumstances, and no matter what your life circumstances are, you could go ahead and go on to become something great. People think that if you come from humble beginnings, so therefore by definition you could only have humble aspirations. But it's not true, right? No matter what your beginnings are, you can make something great of it. So it also teaches us something else, which is that sometimes people think that trauma is something that you have to hide and be ashamed of. And you see the fact that Chazal are very public about what happened to Shmuel's daughter, what happened to Rav Mari's mother. It tells us that L'maisa, our trauma is not something to be embarrassed about, and our trauma is not something to be ashamed about. Things happen to us in life often beyond our control. But L'maisa, the ability to transcend trauma and the ability to move on in life even after difficult things have occurred is the greatest hallmark of accomplishment. So Rav Mari's mother underwent some traumatic events. But Lamaisa, she clearly raised a child, right? And she clearly built a life, and her son became someone great. So again, I will say, sometimes in life, your trauma is a badge of honor. Not that anyone ever chooses it, but Lamaisa, the ability to transcend trauma and rebuild yourself, the pinnacle of human accomplishment. So we'll say, so this is a bit more complicated. In the alternate version of this, they have it as that Rava was the father of Rav Mari. Now we'll say, Rashi already points out that version doesn't make sense, because we know who the father of Rav Mari was. It was Isser Giura. So we'll say, if you look at Rashi for just a moment, it's Rashi mi katoni. You see that Rashi? In the middle of that Rashi, like right across from the Hagos Habach, there's two dots. So says the Gemara. Says the Gemara as follows: Lo garsinan davud Rav Mari Isser Giura shmei. Well, remember again, Rashi says that girsa is wrong. Can't be that Rava is the father of Rav Mari, because you know that Isser Giura is the father of Rav Mari. Umam de garis le garis basrei hachi lahach lishna basra. So we'll say, as we're going to see, the reason why they're going to say it's, or that girsa is going to make sense in just a moment. So the Gemara says as follows: Le lishna basra kasha. And we'll say, according to this second lashon, it's problematic. What's problematic? Hadrav achsherei l'Rav Mari bar Barachel umanye beporsei de baval. So we'll say there's a whole discussion in general again about the fact that Rav Mari bar Barachel was appointed to a position of leadership in Bavel. Then we'll say, now remember, just a quick word about this. The halacha is, Torah says by a melech, by a king, som tasim alecha melech mikarav achecha. Right? So the halach is you have to go ahead and you could place a king upon yourself. Mikarav achecha, the Torah says, from amidst your brethren. So it's a chazal learn out from that halacha l'maisa, the king may not be a convert, nor may he be a child of converts. Right? That a king must come from a direct Jewish lineage. So Chazal often apply this to major positions of communal leadership as well. So there was a whole discussion, again, not our topic for today, but there was a whole discussion about the appointment of Rami Bar Chama to a ministerial position in Bavel. So the Gemara just points out over here, according to the version that says that Rava was Mari Bar Rachel's father, so then why would there have been an issue regarding his appointment to a position of authority in Bavel? To which the Gemara says, Dilma Trey Mari Bar Rachel Hava. So I'll say, so it just could very well be, just so we could kind of sidestep this whole discussion, that maybe there were just two people named Mari Bar Rachel, which of course, the chances of that seem quite nil, but Lamais, I guess the Gemara says it's possible. So essentially what the Gemara is saying is, let's not get caught up over here with whether or not Rava is the brother of Rav Mari or Rava is the father of Rav Mari, because actually it's not all that consequential to our subject matter here. But we'll say, but what is important? Masni la hashmaisei mishmeid Rabbi Yochanan liftar. So we'll listen to this. So Rav Mari bar Rachel, or I should say, excuse me, Rava, the brother of Rav Mari bar Rachel, came along and had a different version. I'll say now back to Mechamer. So we had a little bit of a tangent with Rav Mari bar Rachel. Back now to our regularly scheduled program. So Rava, the brother of, or the father of Rav Mari bar Rachel, came along and he had a different version regarding this Mechamer discussion. And in his version, he holds that it's Potter. In accordance with Rabbi Yochanan, what's the pshat? The Gemara says, listen to this. Am Rabbi Yochanan, ha-mechamer achabem to b'Shabbos, Potter miklum. The Gemara says, Potter miklum, b'shogilo mechayiv chatos. So let's listen to this. Rabbi Yochanan holds that halacha l'maisa, if one violates the malacha of mechamer on Shabbos, you're totally Potter. Totally Potter. There's no punishment. B'shogig lo mechayiv chatas tok shekal Torah kulav avodah zara. So we'll say you won't be chayiv for shogig. Why? Because the Ma'aseh is going to remember, where does the concept of chatas come from? From avodah zara. Avodah zara is the paradigm, and yet by avodah zara we'll say, how do you incur that chatas violation? If what? If you yourself do something. But in mechamer, you are not doing anything. Your animal is doing something. So now we'll say the truth is, maybe you are doing something in that what? You are putting the load on top of the animal, but lamaisa, you're not actively doing anything yourself. So therefore, halacha lamaisa, I'm not chayiv. So therefore, again, Rabbi Yochanan's Potter from chatos. Again, the Gemara says, b'mezid nami lo mechayiv, and I'm not going to be chayiv for mezid either. Why? Disnan hamechala lesa Shabbos b'davar shachayavan al shigagas chatos. Va'al zidono skila, because once we go back to that Mishnah, and the way Rabbi Yochanan reads that Mishnah is as a relationship. That when you are chayiv for something, for inadvertent transgression echatos, you are chayiv for its intentional transgression skila. Ha'ein chayavan al shigagas chatos, ein chayavan al zidonos skila. So we'll say, so this is the position of Rabbi Yochanan. Halach l'maisa, I'm not chayiv b'shogeg because it does not follow the paradigm of avodah zara, which is done an act done bigufo. And number two is I'm not going to be chayiv for b'mezid for skila. Why? Because the Mishnah teaches me a correlation between shogeg and mezid. It is only if you are chayiv achatas b'shogeg that you are chayiv skila b'mezid. But if you're not chayiv achatas b'shogeg, you're not chayiv skila b'mezid. To which the Gemara says, furthermore, belav nami lo mechayiv. We'll say this is wild. Rabbi Yochanan takes it even further. He says, by the way, there's not even a lav. There's not even a lav. You haven't even violated, which also means you won't even get malchus from mechamer. You won't even get malchus. So we'll say, now I do want to point out, Rabbi Yochanan is agreeing that mechamer is a malacha. Right? Mechamer is a malacha. He just holds that it's a little bit of a different malacha than anything else. That whereas other malachos follow a simple paradigm. B'shogeg chatos, b'mezid skila, there's a lav. And Rabbi Yochanan holds mechamer is different. No chatos b'shogeg, no skila b'mezid. By the way, not even a lav. Why not? So the Gemara says, the havile lav shenitan las haris misas bezdin. Because we'll say, listen to this. Because halacha l'maisa, that pasuk that you quoted, lo sase kamulacha ata ubehemtecha. We'll say that is called a lav shenitan las haris misas bezdin. That is the lav that gives bezdin the ability to administer punishment for violation of malacha. See, Rabbi say anytime that Chazal are going to administer a death penalty, there must be a pasuk that vests them with that power. That's called a lav shenitan las haras misas bezdin. So the Gemara says, but it's not even just misa; it's other punishments as well. But the Ma'aser it's misa. V'chol lav shenitan las haras misas bezdin ein lokin alav. And Rabbi say we hold that any time that a lav is the source for Bezdin's ability to administer a death penalty for violation, that same lav cannot be used to generate a malchus obligation or a malchus liability. So we'll say, so this is an incredible shita of Rabbi Yochanan, right? So, well, let's just finish. Vafilu, turn the page. Vafilu man damar lokin, and we'll see, even according to the opinion who says that no, even a lav shenita las haras misas Bezdin can still generate an obligation for malchus. Lichtov rachmana lo sase kamulacha ubehemtecha. Let the pasuk just say, you may not perform any malacha, and nor can your animal. Atol lamali. Both say there's that extra word. Remember again, the way the pasuk reads is lo sase kamulacha ata ubehemtecha. So I need the ata. Both say just say lo sase kamulacha. When the Torah says don't do any malacha, both say who's the Torah talking to? Who's the Torah talking to? Talking to me. So why do you need ata? Just let us say don't do any malacha and your behema. Ata lamali. To teach us something very important. The Gemara says, "Hu niyu de mechayiv behemto lo mechayiv." Both say to teach me that what? That halacha l'maisa, it is only me, it is only I who is chayiv for malacha, but ultimately, again, my animal is not. Only I am chayiv for malacha, but my animal is not chayiv for malacha. So we'll say a dramatic shita of Rabbi Yochanan. So we'll say, so just to frame all the shitas, we have a three-way machlokes. First, Rami Bar Chama says mechamer is a regular malacha. Therefore, what? B'shogeg chayev chatos, b'mezid chayev skila. Good, that's that. Next, Rav Zvid, who understands a little bit differently. Now, Rav Zvid is interpreting Rami Bar Chama, and he says b'shogeg pater, but b'mezid chayev skila. Okay. Third shita, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan essentially says mechamer is a malacha, but halacha l'maisa. Pater on all three accounts, right? Pater b'shogeg, pater b'mezid, pater from malchus, not even a lav, right? And going through the list of each of those. We'll say, just so you should know, the Rambam Paskin is like Rabbi Yochanan, namely that halacha l'maisa, although mechamer is one of the 39 malachas, because this is a malacha that I am not doing myself, but a malacha that my animal is doing. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, there is no chiyuv chatos, there is no chiyuv skila, there can't even be malchus, because remember again, the lav that is here is a lav that is used to generate the misas bezdin, and therefore again, pater miklum. Pretty amazing. We'll say, so again, it's aser, it's a malacha, but there is no liability for the transgression of the malacha. Pretty amazing. So let's go weiter. We'll say, so back to the Mishnah. So remember again, the Mishnah is talking about, I'm transporting my the stuff on my donkey. So it's before Shabbos, the stuff is on my donkey. The donkey is continuing to go ahead and keep it on. So both says, listen to this. So the Gemara says, once you get to your chutzner. Now, it's interesting, the lashon over here is, Higia l'chatzar achitzona notel sakein nitalim b'Shabbos v'shein nitalim b'Shabbos madrach havalim. So once you get to the chatzar achitzona, outer courtyard, so Rashi understands that pretty much once you get into your city and you are comfortable leaving your items there, whatever is not muktzah, you could directly remove from the animal. Everything else, this is assuming like the saddlebags are tied onto the donkey, just untie the knot of the saddlebag. The saddlebags will fall down to the ground themselves, and Shalom al Yisrael. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna, Haisa behem tatuna klei schuchis. So we'll say, listen to this. What happens if my animal, my donkey, is carrying glass? So we'll say, then obviously the eitzah of just untying the saddlebags and letting them fall to the ground is not really going to work. So we'll say, so what can you do? Maybe karim the kistos, umaniach tachtel. You could bring pillows, cushions, put it underneath the saddlebags. We'll say, this way what? When you untie the saddlebags and the saddlebags fall down, they'll fall onto a pillow, onto a cushion, and won't crack. So the Gemara says, Va'anantanan no telasakelim b'Shabbos. But I understand. We'll say glass is not muktzah. Glass is not muktzah. So the Mishnah tell me anything that's on the animal that's not muktzah, I could just what? Take off directly. So why do I have to go ahead and bring pillows to catch the glass as it falls down? Just take it off directly. Ki kamarafuna bekarni du'umna dolo chazile. We'll say, what type of glass are we talking about over here? This is interesting. Blood letter vials, right? Blood letter is vials. So we'll say, so the blood letter, right, would collect blood, I guess, in like vials and glass tubes. So we'll say, so that's the glass we're talking about. So bepashtos, that is muktzah. Why is it muktzah? We'll say this is a category called muktzah machmas mius. When something is disgusting, just people wouldn't normally handle it. So halacha l'maisa, it's muktzah. So the blood letter vial, we'll say, so it's not the pshat that there are no clean glasses in the cupboard. Let me just use a blood letter vial for my lechaim. We'll say, so no one does that. No one does that. So because of that, it's muktzah. So because I can't handle it directly, so what I can do is bring a cushion, put it underneath it, let the vials fall onto that, and therefore it won't break. So the Gemara says, let's get in front. The Gemara says, so we'll say there's another issue here. Remember, we've spoken about this before. Mevata kli mehechano means that Chazal felt that you are not allowed to render a utensil unusable or immobile on Shabbos. Right? Because it will say that's called mevata kli mehechano. You are negating a kli from its effective use on Shabbos. So here's the problem. If you're telling me that so we'll say essentially what you're doing is you're making something muktzah on Shabbos. Because remember, what's the case? The blood letter, vials, thank you, are on the donkey. Now I have to untie their muktzah, so I can't move them off directly. So now what I'm being told is just put a pillow underneath it, untie the saddlebag, let it fall onto the pillow. That's fine for the vials. The problem is now that's what? The pillow is muktzah. The pillow is muktzah. So we'll say, that's called mevata klei mechano, that on Shabbos you're not supposed to make something muktzah. Right? You're not supposed to go ahead and render something unusable and immobile. To which the Gemara says, bishlifi zutri. We're talking about very small vials. So we'll say, so what happens? Or very small utensils. So what will happen? Others will say, they'll fall onto the pillow, and really afterwards they'll just gently roll off. Rashi points out over here, bishlifi zutri, masuos kitanim sheshomet akame tachteim, v'noflan ala kara sheni ad kanshim aginar. So we'll say essentially what happens with these small utensils is they fall onto the pillow, you could gently kind of shift them off onto another pillow or gently onto the ground. So the pillow will still be, all that we need the pillow for is to catch them when they fall off the donkey, but then they could be gently rolled off. So the Gemara says, Meisvei or Ezekasha, Haisa behemto tu'una tevel va'ashashios. So we'll say, ultimately, again, if an animal was carrying tevel, tevel means untithed produce, or ashasha. So we'll say, now, this is interesting. Ashashios means bars of glass, right? Ashashios shal zchuchas. Look at Rashi. He says, Ashashios shal zchuchas, va'afa pisha ashashios, mishtabrim alma asr lahaniach karim v'kistos tachteim. So we'll say, so now listen to this. So if the animal is carrying tevel, right, untied produce, ashashios, bars of large sheets of glass, Matir sachavolim, you could untie the, so remember this is on the donkey, you could untie the load, vasakin noflin, and ultimately again, that which is on the donkey will fall to the ground, the afa pishem mishtabrim, and even though they will end up breaking. They will end up breaking. So we'll say, but you see from here that what? The Braisi here does not give the eitzah about bringing the pillow. Right? Doesn't give the eitzah. So you see from here that what? That halacha l'maisa, bringing the pillow to catch the stuff that falls off the donkey, is not a sanctioned eitzah, to which the Gemara says, Hasam bekusla. What are we talking about? Kusla. What do we mean when we say glass bars? Ashashos are glass bars. What does it mean? It means kusla. We'll say, look here, Rashi is incredible. Kusla, chatichos rechavos shal zchuchis, she'enam kelim, va'osem chalonos, v'chivon deleka psid b'shirasan, v'sofan lahasich b'chatichos ketanos, lo shari lahavi karn v'kis. This is incredible. What are we talking about? Large sheets of glass. So large sheets of glass is incredible. So the Gemara says, we don't really care if they break. Why don't we care if they break? Because in general, what would you do with a large sheet of glass? You would break it. And the pieces were used then for different things. So therefore, again, there's no concern about the large sheet of glass breaking. And then because there's no concern about breakage, therefore, in that case, you cannot bring the pillow. Dekanami diktani dumya detevel. Because after all, again, the Brisa compares the glass to tevel. Ma tevel delo chazile, just like the tevel is unfit for use. Af hachanami delo chazile, so too again the large sheet of glass ultimately again is not really usable in this circumstance. In other words, the sheet itself is too large and will only be usable when broken up into smaller pieces. Umay afapi shemishtab. And I will say, what does it mean even though it'll break? Ma'udatim, what would you have thought? Lahefsid muat nami chashashu. So you say, I might have thought like this. While it's true that the way you use the glass sheet is to break it, I guess, let's say, under normal circumstances, you would break it in a more controlled way so that you don't lose any of the smaller shards. Obviously, if it falls on the ground, you're going to end up losing some of the smaller shards. So I might have thought that because of that, you should be able to go ahead and bring the pillow to catch it. Kamash Malan, no. Kamash Malan will say, Chazal were only concerned for more significant losses. We're not concerned ultimately for smaller losses. Good. First wide line will say, Kuf Nun Dalid Amud Beis, 144b. Okay, says the Gemara. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Yochai Omer, Ashbi says, Haisa behemto tu'una shlif shal tavua. Supposed to listen to this. If my animal is holding a bundle of wheat, Rashi says, Masui shal tavua shal teva. Now this is not teva wheat. I will say that's why, again, it's going to be muktzah. So my animal is holding a bundle of teva wheat. So I'll say, so here's the issue. I'd like to help get it off the animal. So what can I do? Another eitzah is maniach rosho tachteha u'misakol etzarecha. We'll say this is actually interesting. So I could kind of like put my head underneath the bundle and like allow the bundle to roll down my back into another area. Okay, so that's an eitzah that works as well. So I could essentially say the isser of muktzah is to go ahead and take something with your hands. What the Gemara is introducing over here is that if you want to help facilitate the movement of muktzah with your body, but not ultimately again with your hands, so technically speaking, that is mutter. Chamorosh Rabbi Gamliel, Haisa Tuna Dvash. Let's listen to this case. The donkey of Rabbi Gamliel was once holding honey. Rabbi said this is on Shabbos. V'lo ratza lefarka ad matzei Shabbos. Rabbi Gamliel did not want to unload the donkey until Matzei Shabbos. We'll discuss why that is. So the Gemara says, what happens? L'matzei Shabbos mesa. Matzei Shabbos, the donkey died. Why did the donkey die? Overexertion. Right? The donkey was carrying a load the entire Shabbos. Rabbi Gamliel did not want to unload it, and therefore it died Matzei Shabbos. The Gemara says, but why did Rabbi Gamliel do this? But I don't understand. Honey is not muktzah. And the halacha is on Shabbos, you could take off non-muktzah items off the donkeys. What's the problem here? Kisha hidvish. Because we're talking about where the donkey the honey went sour. right? The honey soured. So because the honey soured, again, that's why Rabbi Gamliel felt it was muktzah, and therefore halacha l'maaseh he didn't unload the animal. So the Gemara says, but I don't understand hidvish l'may chazi. So we'll say at the end of the day, once it's soured, what is the honey even usable for? Interesting, the kasisa de gamli. So we'll say apparently everyone knows that sour honey is good for camel sores. It happens, right? So Lamaisa, again, soured honey is used for camel sores. That's what we're going to use it for. V'yatir chavalim v'yiplu saklin. So I don't understand. So fine. So why didn't Gamliel just untie the saddlebags and let the honey fall to the ground? What's the big deal? I will say, especially now, it's not like he was going to eat the honey. So if he wasn't going to eat it, why can't he just untie it and allow it to fall to the ground? To which the Gemara says, mitztaru ziki. So what was the concern? The concern was Rabbi Gamliel felt that if the saddlebags fall to the ground, they're going to split open, and the honey is going to be lost. I, says the Gemara, v'yavi karim v'kistos v'yaniach tachtehem. So I don't understand. So why not bring pillows and cushions, put them underneath the sacks of honey, right, and let it fall on that? What's the problem? Mitanfi, the Gemara says, mitanfi. There's two issues. Number one is that, again, the honey itself, if the bag does split open a little bit, it's going to ruin the pillows and the cushions. And number two, you're thereby rendering the pillows and cushions immobile and unusable for the rest of Shabbos. Gamliel didn't want to do that. The Gemara says, that's all fine, but v'ha'ikat sar b'alei chayim. We will say, what do you do with the fact that there's sar b'alei chayim, right? Rabbi Gamliel caused his animal pain, and remember again, and discomfort, and Chazal attribute the death of that animal on Motzei Shabbos to what? To its overexertion on Shabbos, right? Doesn't that count for something as well? So isn't that important? To which the Rabbi Gamliel held kasavar tsar b'alei chayim d'Rabbanan. Ultimately, again, because Rabbi Gamliel felt that tsar b'alei chayim was d'Rabbanan. I will say this ultimately again is a machlokes. Is a machlokes about whether or not tsar b'alei chayim is d'Rabbanan or d'oraisa. Rabbi Gamliel felt that it was d'Rabbanan. So because it's d'Rabbanan, we're dealing with two d'Rabbanans of muktzah versus tsar b'alei chayim. So Rabbi Gamliel did not feel that the d'Rabbanan of tsar b'alei chayim would in any way offset the d'Rabbanan of muktzah. Okay, so we'll say Abaye ashkechele l'Rava to kamashav shefle lebre agava dechanra. We'll say a very interesting case. Abaye found Rava, and Rava was sliding his kid down the side of a donkey. Now what's the pshat? Take a look at Rashi. So Rashi says over here, to mishaf shef lebrea agava dechamra. Rabbi says it's the second to last short line in Rashi. B'Shabbos l'shashea tinok. He's playing with his kid. So Rabbi was playing with his kid. What was he giving him? Not a donkey ride, right? So the child wasn't sitting on the donkey. The child was sliding down the side of the donkey. Okay. Amrle, Sabai says to Rava, Kamishtar Mishmar Ba'alei Chayim. You're not allowed to do that. You can't do that on Shabbos. You're going ahead and making use of an animal on Shabbos. And halacha l'maaseh will say, you're not allowed to use animals on Shabbos. So how are you permitted to go ahead and do this? Amrle, Stadinhain. Rava said, it's not a problem. I'm only utilizing the side of the animal. Now look at Rashi, first white line in Rashi. Stadin Rashi says, Sheinamar kiva alav. I'm not riding the animal. Elam shavshafo al sidei gabo. Ve'ein ze terech tashmisho. V'rabbanan lo gazwa. So we'll say, halacha l'maaseh, why are you not allowed to ride an animal on Shabbos? What's the issue? So we'll say, there are two issues. So remember again, the issue of riding an animal on Shabbos is a d'Rabbanan, lest you come to break off a branch in order to hit the animal. Right? Remember again, up until now we've been dealing with leading a laden animal. So that's different with a beast of burden. In a chayim you can't load it up. But even with a non-beast, you can't ride an animal on Shabbos. That's a d'Rabbanan. So Abaye finds Rabbah sliding his kid down the side of the animal. Abaye says, that's also, you're utilizing an animal. Rabbah says, no. Chazal only said you can't go ahead and ride on an animal or sit on an animal in a normal riding fashion. That's what the Rabbanan. But utilizing the side of the animal is not a problem. So the Gemara says, from where does Rava know this? How do I know that Chazal were not gozer on the use of the sides of the animal? This nan matir chavalim v'asaki noflin. Because also what we learned in the previous Mishnah, that if the donkey has a saddlebag, you could untie the saddlebag, and the saddlebags could fall to the ground on their own. Now watch this. My love, b'chaver givalki. are we not talking about with tied saddlebags? And I'm both saying, now the assumption the Gemara is making over here is as follows. With these tied saddlebags, in order to untie it, what you kind of have to do is push yourself against the side of the animal in order to untie the saddlebag. That would be use of the side of the animal. Yet Chazal is still telling you that you could do this. So we'll say in order to untie the saddlebags, you have to push yourself against the side of the animal. But yet we see that that's okay. Why? Because Chazal will only goes there on sitting on the animal normally. But usage of the sides of the animal was not problematic. To which the Gemara says, "Lo b'chagra agvalki." So I'll say, no. We're not talking about ultimately again where they're tied saddlebags. Rather, b'chagra gavalki. Rashi says, "Shtayim shein mechubaros yachad ela al yidei tabas mateches." The saddlebags, we'll say, were held together because remember, the saddlebags straddle both sides of the donkey. We assumed at first that they were tied together, like on the back of the donkey, in which case you'd have to kind of put your shoulder in there against the side of the animal to untie them. Kamasha, no. They're held together by some type of metal ring, which could be easily undone without any exertion on the side of the animal. That's the case. So the Gemara says, the law havitztad in inami belachtor. The other possibility, the saddlebags are held together with a clip. So because they're held together with a clip, in other words, they can be easily removed. Esvei. So let's listen to this. So now, what the Gemara is suggesting over here is that halacha l'maisa, usage of the sides of the animal is potentially problematic. In other words, we have no raya. We wanted to say that our Mishnah proves that use of the sides of the animal is mutter, but now what we're seeing is we don't necessarily see that from here. Esvei. So the Gemara is the kasha. Listen to this. Shtayim b'tei adam v'achas bilan. Both say, listen to this. Sukkah. A sukkah only requires maker adin 3 walls, right? Really even two walls in a bit. So we'll say, let's say you have 2 walls that are man-made, va'achas bi'ilan, and the 3rd wall is a tree. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Ksheira, such a sukkah is kasha, ever ve'ein olin la b'yamtiv. But you may not enter into the sukkah on yamtiv. So we'll say, so what's the case? My love. So we'll say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Shtayim bide adav va'achas bi'ilin gabe sukkah shekshera begimel defanas. A sukkah is kosher even if it only has 3 walls. V'im asa shtayim kil chasan v'ashlishi asa bi'ilin kshera. But if 2 regular walls and the 3rd wall is the tree, it's ultimately kosher. De defanos lo ichpas lan im he mechubarosein. Because remember again, when it comes to walls, unlike schach, which cannot be mechubar lekarka, which cannot be attached to the ground, walls of a sukkah we're not so concerned about. So the Gemara says, "Lo ichpas lan im mechubar behu adinim kulan nikbaus bilan v'hadina ketshtayim b'dei adam rabusa shmoinon tafilu hachi ein olin la lecha v'lishon ba'osa sukkah b'yamtav mipnei sheschacha kasher b'dofneh v'nishan Allah v'hu mishtamesh al sechacha v'nosen kil v'nutz mishtashin." So I'll say very quickly, we'll have to stop with this. But what's the concern over here? The concern over here, I will say, is that you have a wall of the sukkah that is made from the tree. Now the way this works is that lamaisa the schach was anchored down to the walls. In this case, you have schach that is anchored down to a tree. Now what they used to do with their schach is they would often put utensils in the schach, so that you were taking stuff and putting stuff on, for use on Yom Tov. You were taking stuff and putting stuff on and off the schach on Yom Tov, which means effectively you were using schach which was tethered to a tree. So because of that, the Gemara was saying that you can't go into that sukkah on Yom Tov. We'll start from this case and Mirz Hashem tomorrow on Shabbos. We'll pick up over here again, still doing the discussion regarding studin, regarding the use of sides. Shkoyach.